Nuclear power is a game changer in Satisfactory, but it's also notoriously difficult to set up, especially if it's your first time doing it. Thankfully, I've designed two blueprints that work together to produce 1 uranium fuel rod per minute, which is enough to produce 12,500 megawatts of power, all with a couple of clicks. So let's break it down. But first, you are going to need a few items and alternate recipes to run this. And also, if you do want to save yourself some time building this blueprint yourself, you can find these blueprints available on my Patreon page. Check it out, the link's below. Now to run this, you'll need two alternate recipes. The first one is the encased industrial pipe alternate recipe, and the second one, the infused uranium cells alternate recipe. You'll also need a total of 20 power shards. We're heavily using power shards in this build in order to keep the footprint small so that we can fit it all into two blueprints. You're also going to require the following resources: 22.5 raw quartz, 45 limestone, 57.5 caterium ingots, 62.5 uranium ore, 62.5 sulfur, and 65.25 steel ingots, and 80 copper ingots per minute. This setup will allow you to produce 1 uranium fuel rod per minute, which translates to fuel that will supply 5 nuclear power plants, each being supplied by 240 water per minute. Now, this guide doesn't cover nuclear waste recycling or the setting up of the power plants, so if you are interested in a follow-up video specifically on the recycling, do let me know in the comments below, and also subscribe to the channel for more. Let's get started building. We're going to start off with the infused uranium cells blueprint. Now we're going to break this down into 3 stages. We'll start off with the bottom stage, which is just the layout for the manufacturer and the constructor, and then we'll move on to a kind of mid stage, which shows how I've done the logistics for the bottom floor and also the power, before moving on to the final section, which is the top section, which houses everything else required for the infused uranium cells. Starting off with the lower section, you're going to want to build a 4x4 grid, and these are going to be 2 meters deep. The reason for this is we want to make sure that all of our foundations are the same throughout our build, so I always go with a 2 meter deep foundation. We then have our first manufacturer. This is going to be placed in the second row, going up towards the back row. And this will be set to infused uranium cells and set to 250% clock speed. So you will need to use 3 power shards for that. From here, we are going to feed various resources into the build. You can see along the bottom, we have our first conveyor of items. This is going to be the sulfur, and that's going to run straight into the manufacturer. I've used the elevators to keep the build relatively clean so that we have more space to work around with. The 62.5 sulfur per minute is going to go on the furthest elevator that you see to the right. And then in the middle, we'll have our 62.5 uranium ore. And we'll do this by placing an elevator with a right angle here. And then we're going to grab our Mark II belts. And you can see we've now brought the uranium ore into the manufacturer. The last 2 items are going to be the quick wire, which we will produce on the floor above. These are going to require 185 per minute. So do be aware of that. You're going to have to build an elevator in a little bit up to about here. You'll know once you've placed the ceiling above this. The other thing that you want to build is another constructor. Now this is slightly offset against the final column. This is going to be producing silica. It's running at 100% clock speed, so no need for any power shards for this. And the raw quartz is coming in from this elevator here. At this point, there are 3 more things that we need to talk about. We have in the lower left-hand corner a pillar that is going to go up throughout the build. This is how we're transporting power between the 2 levels, and we're going to have a connection to the manufacturer from here. We're also going to have in the right-hand side a cavity wall or pillar running across, a beam running across the build to carry the power. You'll see this over on the next layout, how we've done this. And then the other thing that I want to bring your attention to is the output of the manufacturer. The output of the manufacturer is exactly 4 walls high. So on this 4th wall, if we grab floor hole, you can see that it goes through the hole there. You're not going to want any walls because this is going to open up into the rest of the factory. You'll also want to bear in mind that exactly next to this, we're going to have another elevator coming down from here, which is going to take encased industrial beams across. But we'll talk about that in a moment. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, just back on this beam before we go along to the next section, is this little power joint here. This is going to connect to the other blueprint power joint, which will be adjacent to it. This is the only thing that we'll need to do other than connecting a few conveyors in this blueprint. So we'll need to connect the power up between them and the conveyors. And here's the middle layer. So just a couple of bits to bear in mind here. First off, we have our quick wire, which is coming in from a Mark III belt. From this section here, there is going to be an elevator, which you can see just there going down to this, and it's going to run the quick wire into the manufacturer in a moment. You'll also want to have this power section. You can do it differently to me, or you can do it the same. All I've done is taken this small pillar across from the edge of 2 walls and also in the middle of them, and run that all the way across, and then covered these with some walling where we've connected it to the power here. Remember, this goes between the 2 floors, and then along here to the constructor before going to here to be joined with the next blueprint. For the next floor, we're going to want to grab our walls, and we're going to take it up 4. This will give you the perfect height for the next floor, but you're going to want to use the 1 meter deep floors for this, and you can just cover this in. Again, you will want to also continue with the pillar. That's going to go all the way up, and here we are ready for the next floor. And here we are with the 3rd layer. And for this section, we are going to be producing the encased industrial pipes, so you are going to need the alternate recipe for that. We're also going to be producing the quick wire, which is needed for the manufacturer below with the uranium infused cells. Infused uranium cells even. So for this, we're going to need to bring in 3 different resources for this floor. The first one is in the bottom left-hand section. We're going to need 31.5 steel ingots. Then the next one across is going to be 45 limestone. And then to the right of that, we're going to need a total of 37.5 deuterium ingots. You can start by placing the constructor for the steel pipes, which is going to be in front of the steel ingot input. And that's going to be placed exactly in the middle of the 4 foundations, slightly offset to the bottom. In front of this, we're going to place the assembler. You can see this is directly over the 1st and 2nd column, with it being placed in the 3rd and 4th row. It's slightly over the line from the 3rd and 2nd row as well, so make sure that you have that in those positions. And along with this, I should mention the steel pipes are going to be overclocked to 105%, so you will need a single power shard for that. And we're going to underclock the assembler to 75 clock speed. Facing the side of the steel pipe constructor, we have the concrete constructor. This is running at 100% clock speed, and we have run the output of the concrete directly into the assembler, trying to make it look as clean as possible. From here, the output of the assembler will run along the top of the layout to the 3rd column, and in the center, just slightly offset against the wall, we will have our elevator going to the floor beneath. As you can see, this should be in line with the infused uranium cells that we're producing. Our last step for this section of the build is going to be producing the quick wire. This is going to require that 37.5 deuterium ingots per minute and run from an elevator up to the 2nd row. In the 3rd row, slightly offset between the edge of the 2nd and 3rd, and also the 3rd and 4th column, we're going to be placing our 2 constructors. These are going to be set to quick wire. One's going to be set to 150% clock speed and the other one at 162.5% clock speed. Now I haven't balanced them so that they're exactly equal because I don't want to have to add another power shard to the build. And these are going to be producing 187.5 quick wire per minute. We're going to merge them in front of the first constructor on the right, and then all of those 187.5 quick wire are going to go down to the floor below, and then they will go across this conveyor line, which is going to be connected to the ceiling above into the manufacturer to produce those infused uranium cells. The final element that we need to add for this build is going to be our power line section. Now I've done this taking the second wall, the center section, we're running a pillar across, and we're also going to do the same from this here. So this has been offset. To do this, I should mention, we've taken a road barrier and placed it on the edge and then held Control to replace the barrier with a wall. And that's how this is offset versus this pillar. For more tips like that, do check out my 30 tips that we do in less than 10 minutes. But from here, we've run the other beam across, again in the middle, and you can see that there is a power junction here. It runs to a line that's here that connects both up to the power pillar, which runs to the bottom, but also the constructors here. And from here, we'll also run another line to connect to the assembler, and along here you can connect these how you wish. In fact, what I'd probably do is run this along to here and then connect these up. Again, this does at this point come down to personal preference. The only thing that you do need to bear in mind if you're using my style for building is that we're going to connect the power again on the edge here that connects to the other blueprint with another power joint. So this will have to connect to the other blueprint. But here you go, you have the infused uranium cells now set up. The next thing that we're going to need to do is the second blueprint, which will be for the uranium fuel rods. Let's get started. The first floor is going to be really easy to do. First, you're going to want to place 4 walls with single conveyor entrances in the center of them. And then from here, we're going to place down 4 constructors. These will be in front of the conveyor holes, and they're going to be just over the middle of the first and second row. Then we're going to place 2 assemblers. Both of them are going to be in between the 2 constructors, just across from the third and fourth row. The outputs are then going to be brought up to the top of the ceiling, which we're going to talk about shortly, and then brought down through the center to where the next inputs are. And from this angle, you can see all of the inputs. We're going to need from right to left 33.75 steel ingots entering in the first constructor on the right. This is going to be producing steel pipes. We then have the wire being produced in the second to right column, which is going to require 30 copper ingots per minute. We're then going to need 50 copper ingots per minute to become copper sheets, and then finally 20 caterium ingots per minute to become quick wire. For the constructor and assembler section on the right, the steel pipes are going to have to be set to 112.5% clock speed using 1 power shard, and then the constructor to the left, which is producing the wire, is going to need 2 power shards and be overclocked to 200% clock speed. These resources are then going to head into the assembler in front of them, producing stators at 150% clock speed. The left-hand section of constructors and the assembler are going to be producing AI limiters. The assembler is going to be set at 100% clock speed, so no need for power shards there. However, you are going to need a few for the constructors below. The constructor on the right, which is taking 50 copper ingots per minute, is going to be set to 250% clock speed when producing copper sheets. So do be aware that's 3 power shards, and then we also need to overclock the quick wire to 100 quick wire per minute, which I think is 166.2 7% clock speed or something like that. So you will need 2 power shards for that one as well. At this point, we need to place the ceiling and also the power. So for this, it's going to be quite tight. We're going to place our walls 3 high, and then from here, we're going to place our 2-meter deep foundation across, filling this out. As we go under, we're going to try and make sure that the power that we had in the previous build is the same as this one. So it's the opposite to what we had before. So we're going to place our small metal pillar over the edge of these 2 walls in the center and bring them across to here. Remember that we also have a power joint on the other one about there. So that's going to connect with that lower floor. We're also going to need to bring the power across, and you can do this however you wish. So we can connect this up here, another side over here, and the same with these. Finally, we're going to bring the outputs for the assemblers along this center mark all the way across to about here, but we'll place them once we know where the assembler is on the next floor. And here we have the final piece to this puzzle with the final layout. So for this, we're going to place the manufacturer so that it is facing the center of the second column. That's where the output is going to be for the uranium fuel rods. Next to this, we're going to place the assembler, and we want to make sure that the assembler's output is just about in line with the manufacturer. This should also mean that your inputs are going to be over the edge of the 3rd and 4th column, if you're going from left to right this time, and then also the center at the 4th column. This does mean that going back to the previous layout, that we're going to have our inputs just over the center of this constructor and then in between these ones. And we'll run the items along the center, or however you wish. I try to keep them in line, a bit like this. The assembler here will be set to electromagnetic control rods and running at 125% clock speed. So you will need to use a single power shard for this assembler. And then to the left of that, the manufacturer will be producing the uranium fuel rods at 250% clock speed. So you're going to need 3 power shards for that. The first input of the 3 for this manufacturer is going to be from the assembler that you've just placed. Just run that into the first input next to it. And then we're going to jump over to the other side so that you can see a little bit clearer the inputs for the other 2. If you remember, in the first blueprint, we had 2 outputs that were coming out in the center 2 foundations. They are going to connect directly into the manufacturer here. One's going to be for those encased industrial pipes and the other one for the infused uranium cells, which will be on the left and the right. The last thing to do at this stage is to connect everything up to power, and we've done this by placing our beam, which should connect with the other blueprint's beam. If you remember rightly, the last beam was over the center spot, one of these, but offset by a pillar in the corner. So this pillar is going to be in the center section over the edge of the side of the 2 walls in the bottom right hand corner. So we're going to place that into there, and then from here we're going to run the power to both the manufacturer and the assembler, and then making sure that we also have the power wall outlet just on the bottom of this section here. That's really important for when we put these together, which we'll do now. I'm not going to talk about the decoration for this. You can see kind of what we've done. We've played around with materials, but it comes down to personal preference. So there's no reason for me really to show you unless that's something you're really interested in which case just let me know below. But now we're going to connect these together, and I'm going to show you how to connect them. First, we're going to place down the infused cells. So to do this, make sure that you're in your blueprint mode by pressing R. And I've connected these to a 4x4 foundation blueprint. So we're going to place 1 here, like so. And then once that's done, we can see that we need these 2 sections to connect. So we're going to grab our other one and make sure that it is in line. And this will be made easier once update 8 comes with the new blueprint changes, but I'm comfortable that that is the correct position. And then finally, all we need to do is connect this power joint together. And then also if we go upstairs, you may have noticed I have a a doorway. The reason for is to connect a walkway up to there. And then once on the top floor, you're going to want to connect these two together. And last but not least, make sure that these two outputs from the encased industrial pipes and also the infused uranium cells are connected to the manufacturer here. And then you're done. And at this point, all you need to do is wait for all of your resources to enter in the blueprint. Make sure that you are using the correct speed belts. The sulfur and the uranium all need to be at least tier 2 or higher, which we haven't done in this particular example. And there you are, a really small factory blueprint to produce 12,500 megawatts of power. If you guys did find this video helpful, please do hit the thumbs up and let me know if you would like to see that recycling plant in a video coming soon. But we are going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to all of our amazing supporters, most notably our Solarclipse patrons, James Owen, Firefless, and Treble, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben, Star, Shoku, the MN Wolf, and That Dude AW, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Dashlom. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.